Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Welcome back to the Bible for Busy People. I'm Jen, and this is the last day of our series on the names of God. I have been soaking all of this study in. I know I've already told you I'm a word nerd, and I've loved going back and looking at these Hebrew names for God, what they mean, what they would have meant to people back in these biblical times, how God interacted with them, how he showed them his character, why they called him these names, and what they mean for us today. I found it all to be pretty fascinating. I hope it's been interesting for you as well. Today's name is Jehovah Saboath, the God of hosts, of multitudes, God over armies, a sovereign God. It goes along with some of yesterday's scriptures, but there was one connection to this name in scripture that was surprising to me. It's a story that I know that I'm very familiar with, but I didn't realize that it used this name, and I was curious as to why. So let's dig in. We're going to look at 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 1 through 20. It says, "There was a man from Ramathaim Zophim in the hill country of Ephraim. His name was Elkanah, son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. He had 2 wives, the first named Hannah and the second Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah was childless. This man would go up from his town every year to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of Armies at Shiloh, where Eli's 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were the Lord's priests. Whenever Elkanah offered a sacrifice, he always gave portions of the meat to his wife Peninnah and to each of her sons and daughters. But he gave a double portion to Hannah, for he loved her, even though the Lord had kept her from conceiving. Her rival would taunt her severely just to provoke her, because the Lord had kept Hannah from conceiving. Year after year, when she went up to the Lord's house, her rival taunted her in this way. Hannah would weep and would not eat. 'Hannah, why are you crying?' her husband Elkanah would ask. 'Why won't you eat? Why are you troubled? Am I not better to you than 10 sons?' I don't think he was very sympathetic. On one occasion, Hannah got up after they ate and drank at Shiloh. The priest, Eli, was sitting on a chair by the doorpost of the Lord's temple. Deeply hurt, Hannah prayed to the Lord and wept with many tears. Making a vow, she pleaded, 'Lord of armies, if you will take notice of your servant's affliction, remember and not forget me, and give your servant a son. I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and his hair will never be cut.' While she continued praying in the Lord's presence, Eli watched her mouth. Hannah was praying silently, and though her lips were moving, her voice could not be heard. Eli thought she was drunk and said to her, 'How long are you going to be drunk? Get rid of your wine.' 'No, my lord,' Hannah replied, 'I am a woman with a broken heart. I haven't had any wine or beer. I've been pouring out my heart before the Lord. Don't think of me as a wicked woman. I've been praying from the depth of my anguish and resentment.' I think about what we read the other day about Jacob struggling with God and how his name became He Who Struggles with God, how God invites us to struggle with him, and how Hannah did that here. Eli responded, 'Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant the request you've made of him.' 'May your servant find favor with you,' she replied. Then Hannah went on her way. She ate and no longer looked despondent. The next morning, Elkanah and Hannah got up early to worship before the Lord. Afterward, they returned home to Ramah. Then Elkanah was intimate with his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. After some time, Hannah conceived and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, because she said, 'I requested him from the Lord.'" In this story, a woman named Hannah is going through a season of infertility, and this story felt so poignant to me when I was going through my own season of infertility years ago. For me, it was unexplained and it was unexpected. I related to her pain. She felt taunted. She felt humiliated. She cried out to God. But I was curious why she calls on the God of hosts, or the Lord of armies. It signifies his sovereignty and his power, so that kind of makes sense. But there's also, as the Bible Project pointed out, there's significance here in the humble being exalted over the proud. She talks about bringing down the proud in her prayer in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 1 to 11. We'll read that now. It says, Hannah prayed, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. My horn is lifted up by the Lord. My mouth boasts over my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. And there is no rock like our God. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give power to his king. He will lift up the horn of his anointed." Now, Israel at the same time was also going through this painful season. Their leaders were Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, as was mentioned, and they were corrupt. They were disobeying God and they were harming the people. Eventually, they're put to death. The Israelites are also at odds with the Philistines coming and stealing the Ark of the Covenant of God at one point. And eventually, the Israelites demand that God give them a king, even though God is telling them and Samuel is telling them, you don't want a king. These are just more examples of God humbling the proud. I think what I noticed out of all of this is that this is a spiritual battle. Hannah's son Samuel, who she did give back to God, ended up being the one to lead Israel for years. And he was the one who anointed 2 kings at the demand of the Israelites, both King Saul and King David, and he became a close advisor to both. He was the one to call out their pride when both Saul and David disobeyed God. God is an honorable warrior. He is mighty and he is sovereign. He brings low the proud. He fights for righteousness. He lifts up the humble. And I think that's what I kept drawing back to in Hannah's original prayer, is that this is the God of hosts, the God of armies. He is not just sovereign, but he is righteous. Today, as we close out, consider the God of hosts, the one who leads multitudes in the spiritual battle, and he calls out sin, injustice, and immorality. He is truly set apart. He works through all circumstances for our good and his glory, and he has the victory at the end of the day. Thanks for joining me in this series about the names of God, and I look forward to talking with you again next week.
Thank you for listening to The Bible for Busy People. If you need prayer or want to go deeper in your faith, visit our show notes. Will you take a moment to share with a friend and leave a review? It helps the Bible get into even more people's minds and hearts. Find more podcasts that will recharge you at purposely.com.